Hello and welcome to the Super Casuals. My name is Auronado, and this is a full review of Dragonball FighterZ. Be aware there will be spoilers, but if you've watched our story playthrough, then you've already seen everything anyways. We'll start with graphics. The first thing anybody notices in a game is what it looks like, though it's the most obvious place to start. This game uses cel shading to produce characters that look as close to their anime counterparts as possible. The developers did an amazing job of getting every character as close to the source material as they possibly could, but they didn't just stop there. The animations are fluid and represent what the characters would actually do on screen in the show. Everything looks gorgeous, and there are amazing little details, like when the ki blasts get deflected and go careening off into the background, then blow up and destroy pieces of the map where they land. The energy blasts themselves look big and flashy. The explosions have the great balance of clogging the screen while still allowing you to see the characters on the screen. Overall, my only complaint with the graphics is that the menu screens are, frankly, pretty bland. But if that's the biggest complaint I have, then the developers did an incredible job making the game gorgeous, and the art style itself should age very, very well. I'll give Dragonball FighterZ a 10 out of 10 on graphics. Next up is sound. I immediately had to switch the game settings to English voice acting because I just couldn't stand the Japanese versions. However, the fact that we have that option is fantastic, and I thank the developers for giving it to us. Unfortunately, this is done at the global level, which means that you can't change one character to English and another to Japanese. You're stuck with all or the other. The voice actors themselves did a great job, and the writing fits the character personalities perfectly. There is a wide variety of musical tracks in this game, both original and sourced from the show. However, the game does lack a customized playlist for you to pick and choose what can play during your battles. The music itself is functional but forgettable. The sound effects are much the same. The various attacks sound the same as they do in the shows, and that includes the energy blasts. The downside to this is that there's not a whole lot of variety to the impacts of your attacks, and they do tend to blend together. The audio balance isn't done very well before you play with the options. The music is set too high, and the voices are too quiet, despite all the numbers being the same when you're in the options itself. It is nice that you can change the levels, but you have to because you play story mode, for example, where you can barely even hear the characters talking over the game music. Overall, I'll give the sound score an 8 out of 10. It does its job, and it does it well, though it does lack personal customization. As for the story and single-player modes, Dragonball FighterZ has the standard variety of single-player modes for any modern fighting game. That, of course, means your story mode, training, arcade, and local multiplayer if you choose to do so. The training and practice mode itself is quite robust, it's very customizable, and it has everything any hardcore fighting game enthusiast will need in order to practice whatever it is they need to practice. Then we have the story mode, which is divided into 3 story arcs which are not sequential. You play as a disembodied soul that enters into the bodies of the various Dragon Ball fighters, doing the fighting for them. The developers made the story progression needlessly complicated, creating a series of connect-the-dot map screens which you'll most likely ignore, just pushing towards unlocking the characters that are on the screen if there are any, then pushing straight towards the boss encounter. I found that the map screen did not add anything to the story. It served no purpose beyond forcing you into extra filler battles against evil clones. Worse, in the first story arc, you're forced into doing tutorial battles that not only teach you what you likely already learned in the training mode, but some of these maps force you to repeat these tutorial battles multiple times. You have no choice but to get through them in order to advance the story. The story arcs themselves are disjointed, and they each ended poorly. The arcs do not flow from one to the next. They used more of a soft reset following similar storylines with different characters. And it's not even easy to tell where exactly in the Dragon Ball timeline that the story even takes place. The arcs themselves all had problems. We'll start with the first. I found that it ended very abruptly and left us with a number of unanswered questions. For example, what happens to the disembodied soul? What about the waves they keep talking about? Who knows? We don't find out. You think, okay, I'll start the second arc, and that's going to explain things. Well, I'm sorry, but it was even worse. Not only does it end without resolving anything, again, the soul is not resolved, the waves are not resolved, but then you're left with the bad guys ready to fight the good guys, and it just ends. Do they fight? Will they fight? What happens? Who wins? Who knows? We don't. It's just left unsaid. Then you enter into the final arc, which was frankly a chore to even get through. For the first several maps, you are forced to use the same two characters over and over and over and over again. You do not have the ability to unlock any characters on any maps. After completing a number of maps, you're just suddenly given the rest of the cast, and then it's a whole bunch of more filler fights over even more maps until suddenly it's the final boss, suddenly the story's over, the soul thing is still unresolved, you still don't know anything about the waves, and after all the story's done, we still don't have any answers. The developers could have done a much better job here overall. Fighting games are not exactly known for having the best stories, but this one was a real dud for me. I will give them credit for trying something new, but really, by overcomplicating things, they just hurt the end result. The arcs didn't flow, and too much was left unresolved. I'll give them a 6 out of 10 for having all the standard modes available and for at least the individual characters well, if the story itself was lacking. What we need in the single-player modes are there, but that's it. Gameplay and multiplayer. A fighting game lives or dies on its gameplay. And Arc System Works did an incredible job making this game both accessible to the casual crowd, but deep enough to entice the hardcore fighting audience. If you're the button-mashing type, you can produce solid, damaging combos that look flashy, and they feel great. But below the surface of these easy command inputs is a surprisingly complex tapestry of balance that the dedicated fighting game enthusiast can practice for hours in an attempt to master. You have assists and chase downs, cross-ups, super chains, juggles, and so much more, all available. And depending on which characters you use, they'll have surprisingly different styles despite the largely standardized button inputs. Dragonball FighterZ does stand out on its lack of easily comboable overheads, relying on instant air dash attacks which are much more difficult to pull off without an arcade stick accessory. This can make it much harder for people to deal with opponents sitting in crouch block if they don't dish out the extra money for a better controller. If you're a casual player, this won't matter to you, but it does deserve to be said. One negative I have to mention is that many characters are capable of keeping opponents locked into incredibly long chain juggles. If you're on the receiving end of this, it's very frustrating to have no control over your character for very, very long stretches of time, hoping that your opponent screws up an input so that you can actually control your character again. At times, there are simply too many resets and chase downs and other things to keep you floating in the air far, far longer than should be appropriate. As for online multiplayer, I found the netcode to be pretty inconsistent. Most of the time, the frame delay would be in the 2 to 3 range, there'd be very little lag, but then all of a sudden it might spike up past 20 frames, and sometimes, regardless of whether the frame delay is high or low, the fight would just lag really, really hard. And there's no way to quit a match outside of pulling the plug, so if you get stuck in a lag fest, well, you're stuck. Local multiplayer takes this issue out, so fighting game tournaments should be amazing to see as time goes on, and over time we assume that the netcode will be updated and this shouldn't be as much of a problem. As far as the gameplay and multiplayer goes, I will still give Dragonball FighterZ a solid 9 out of 10. Whether you're the type to just spam buttons and hope for the best, or you're the type to spend hours in practice mode perfecting the most ridiculous combos possible, there's plenty of lightning-fast fighting action in this title for you. The developers would do well to continue working on the netcode, but it's true of every online game. Overall, fans of Dragon Ball will be delighted with this game, but the gameplay is strong enough on its own, without needing the audience to love the Dragon Ball franchise to love this game. or even know anything about the story itself. While it would be nice if there was a wider variety of modes in the game, the important stuff is all there and it's done well. Barring the story, but again, fighting games not known for good story. The cast of available characters is robust and varied, though it is unfortunate to see character doubles in place regardless of different movesets. The story continuity goes right out the window when you have multiple versions of Gohan, Goku, and Vegeta, with rumors of more on the way for the latter two. The doubles themselves aren't even used in the story, further confusing people who are not fans of the series. And there are some fan favorites missing on the cast, but DLC characters are on the way to help with that issue if you're willing to pony up the extra money. So, overall, after the disaster that was Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Dragon Ball FighterZ filled the hole that fighting game enthusiasts were looking for in a tag team fighting game, and did a better job than anybody was likely expecting. It's gorgeous, it plays very well, and it's fun for both casual and hardcore audiences. The issues the game does have are not major, and its strong points are so well done that the weaknesses are much more easily forgiven. I give Dragon Ball FighterZ a solid 9 out of 10, and I highly recommend this title. Thank you for watching the Super Casuals. I have been Auronado. Remember, keep it casual. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more.